So why are you so excited about system anagrams?
The systems are awesome. The system saves you from all the stress. The worst thing about being a business owner is having other people work for you.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.
Hello, I'm Sophie Law and welcome to Another Byte. This is the YouTube show for MSPs who want to improve their marketing and grow their business. How do we do that? Well, we have a chat about it all with Paul Green from the MSP Marketing Podcast and special guest too. More of that in a little while. But first of all, Paul, as always, is here like a little bug in my coffee, just buzzing around.
How can the bug buzz if it's in your coffee? Surely it's got coffee all over its wings now. What are we talking about?
You know, just when they fall in, they do that little buzzy thing. Anyway, something that some people might regard as a buzzy thing is something you were talking about this week. And it was another thing where I listened to you and thought, God, he's so organized. It's sort of disgusting, which is payment reviews and regular payment reviews. And how often people might be surprised to find that they're not charging their clients right for all the different things they're giving them, which I find slightly terrifying. Also made me want to go and review everything I do.
Well, you say it's about me being organised. It's actually about me making sure, or not just me, but MSPs making sure that they get paid for everything they do. You know, I must have challenged perhaps 100 MSPs to go and do the review, to go and look and say, right, are you charging correctly for every seat, every license, is every little thing being done? And 99 of those MSPs have when I've challenged them, have said, oh, I'm sure we're fine. And let's say 95 of those have come back to me a week later with their their head down, looking a bit humbled, saying, actually, we did discover that over at this client, there are 4 new users.
95 is high.
Well, I'm making these figures up, but you get the idea. That, they'll have discovered that, there's 4 users here that we never charged for, and we added some seats here. Or even conversely, that they're still charging clients for something they're not actually supplying, which is almost as bad. I mean, you would say, well, surely that's free money, but that's not good for your relationship with your client. So I think it's one of those things. You do the, like we were suggesting on the podcast, do the audit once, so you get yourself to a position where you know everyone is being charged correctly, and then just create a monthly task. So once a month, you check in, you check the licenses. You know, these faults happen not because anyone is being negligent, but because we're busy, and someone sends in a ticket. Can you add a new user? The tech sets them up, and they just forget that final step of updating the PSA or emailing someone or whatever it is that they have to do. So I think just going in and reviewing it once a month, it's a pretty sensible thing to do.
Which is really sensible. But if you're not sensible and you put it off, and then you discover this big backdated issue, I found that idea slightly terrifying, that you might have been not charging someone for 6 months. And I am very much of the school of, if I'm in a shop and they make a mistake with the change or they forget to scan something, I'm like, that's your mistake. I'm not going to correct that. I'm just going to walk away and enjoy myself. So what you were saying, I thought was really interesting about the sort of the line, like where you decide when it's okay to backdate the charges and when you've just got to go, my bad.
Yeah. Well, before I answer that question, what you've just described there, Sophie, is called shoplifting, where if the shop doesn't charge you for something, perhaps because you're doing the self-scan and it didn't scan, and you decide to take the item anyway.
No. We weren't talking about me scanning. No.
You are. No, you have just committed yourself to a public video that you are a shoplifter. Anyway. As we were saying in the podcast, there is a line, and if you've messed up the billing for a couple of months, I think that's okay to go back to your client and say, hands up, we made a mistake, we didn't add this on, so we're going to just backdate it. And also it depends on the amount as well. If it's like $30, it doesn't really matter. If you've been screwing this up for 6 years, you cannot go back to a client and say, hey, 6 years ago, we added on 5 new users and we never charged you for them. So here's a bill for $17,000. Could you pay that next week? There comes a point where you have to take responsibility for your own mistakes, which obviously you will be doing when you're in court and the judge says, Sophie Law, I sentence you to 10 years of hard labor for shoplifting and other crimes which you will probably admit as part of this process.
Just like to clarify, I was talking about other people's mistakes there, other people's mistakes. Now, one of my favorite things about you, Paul, is when you get really excited about something very geeky, which this week in the podcast you did with a thing called system anagrams. And I could hear your voice getting all excited. And I was like, here it is. He's got another genius idea. But, people do subscribe to MSP Marketing and listen to your advice. Regrettably, I have to admit, you do know your stuff. So why are you so excited about system anagrams?
Well, it's funny that you pick up on the word anagram, because I made a mistake in the podcast. I said anagram and I meant acronym. And it was only on listening to and it's too late to see, I've made my own mistake now. I can't go back and do it because the podcast is out there. It's been downloaded on thousands of devices. So the acronym, I believe the word system it wasn't designed this way, but you can look at it as an acronym. Saves you stress, time, energy, and money. And the reason I like to wrap that up in an acronym is because that's what the systems do. The systems are awesome. The system saves you from all the stress. The worst thing about being a business owner is having other people work for you, because other people never do things quite as well as you do. They physically cannot do things as well as you do because it's just the way they are. So you have to systemize them. You have to create things around and make it easy for them to know exactly what to do. And that's where the system comes in. And there are 2 books I can recommend. Let me just grab them from my pile here. I have a pile of the most interesting books. In fact, I've only got one of them here.
Is there anything you don't have in your room? You got the board, you got the books.
Well, it's interesting.
Everything to hand. It's like a little Aladdin's cave in there.
It is like an Aladdin's cave, but actually, I'll let you into another behind-the-scenes secret. You may or may not have noticed that the background is a bit different. So we've just started this week a major refurb of our house, and my daughter and I have zero access to our downstairs because there are literally, not currently, not right now, but during the day, there are builders there knocking down walls and moving things. So you're in our new family living space, which is also my office, which is unlike, this is the smallest room in the house. This is our spare room. Anyway, this is one of the 2 books I recommend on systemizing your business. So this is Built to Sell by John Warrilow, which is an updated or kind of like a more modern version of the original book on this topic, which is called The E-Myth Revisited. And that was written by Michael Gerber. So both of these books, they're different versions of the same thing. And they talk about exactly that it's hell. It's utter hell to be a business owner and what you have because of all the different things that happen. And you have to systemize the business. It's the only way to get peace of mind and to sleep well at night.
And one more thing before we get on to our special guest, which I thought was, again, disgustingly simple, but a good tip, which I feel like you sort of specialize in now, which is the follow-up calls. When there's been a problem, just giving them a call a week later and saying, hey, we did that thing. How's everything going? And I thought, it's so simple. But actually, if I was your client, that would make me feel really good.
Yeah.
And I feel conflicted.
Yeah, you're conflicted because you're listening to good advice from Paul. And that makes me sound so arrogant when I say it that way. I'm not that arrogant. When you got to put yourself in, imagine what's a good cars, right? You and I are not really car people, Sophie, in that when the car's broken, we're both a bit like, I don't know what's wrong. So imagine you take your car to the garage fixes it, but imagine, and this would never happen, but imagine the mechanic rang you a week later saying, all right, love, I fixed your car a week ago. How is it now? Is it still all right? You would be blown away by that.
It might be a female mechanic, could I just say? But yes, I get your point.
Yeah, but all right. Hello,
very gruff female mechanic.
I fixed your car a week ago. How is it now? And you would, from a customer, our special guest Max is sitting. I can see him in the green room now, and he's sitting there thinking,
"What the heck is going on?
What is this show? This isn't as good as the podcast. What's going on here?"
Right.
But you would be blown away because it's the most simplest piece of customer service is a follow up. How's it going? And as we said in the podcast, that's not about generating more work. It's about making someone feel that you genuinely care. Here's the thing. Let's link it to what we were just talking about with systems. You can systemize this. You can set a task. When you've dealt with a ticket for someone that's not just a password change, or it's something of consequence, set a task in the PSA for a week later for that technician to pick up the phone and call them just to check in and see how things are going. Instantly, your client's perception of the customer service will dramatically shoot up overnight, just like that, just from that simple follow-up call. And when their perception that the customer service is high goes up, their retention goes up as well.
Yeah, it's so good, so simple. Even our special guest agrees. Max Pruger from Kaseya, who's been forced to sit through all of that. I can only apologize. But we're talking to you about something entirely else, which is compliance. And what I really liked about what you were saying on the podcast about compliance is it's such a simple thing. It's even more simple than Paul and his concept, but it's so important. And do you think there is a thing where people are like, it's just following the rules. I'm pretty sure we're fine. A bit like what Paul was saying earlier. I'm pretty sure we're paying them correctly. I don't need to check it. Do you think there's a bit of kind of lackadaisical attitude around it and people don't realize how important it is?
So I will answer that question, but before I do, I want to go on the record as saying I pay for all of my products and services. Just to be clear.
Is this where we're getting?
Just making sure that's the case. And then in answer to your direct question, I think that historically it was a lackadaisical approach. I think that you had frameworks and standards out there, but the majority of folks, unless they were in a specific regulated industry where they knew that eventually some third party was going to come in and there were going to be financial repercussions, they did not take it very seriously. So we have that in the US with HIPAA. It's been around for 25 years. It was optional initially, which means nobody did it. And then when they finally started enforcing it, the 15 plus years of momentum that we had pretty much meant that nobody did it anyway. So that is changing. Obviously, the EU is at the forefront of it with GDPR. So they started mandating and enforcing GDPR. And then in my personal opinion, it's not really going to be the government entities, but it's going to be the insurance companies. So the Chubbs of the world and Travelers and those guys, the insurance underwriters who are really going to enforce some sort of compliance requirements. Because at the end of the day, if you have a breach and you have an insurance policy, the insurance companies, they're fantastic, but they're in the business of collecting premiums, not making payments. And so they're going to do whatever they can, justifiably so, within their policies, within those terms and conditions, to make sure that before they make a payout, that end customer was actually following the requirements, the compliance guidelines that are in those terms and conditions. So I do see it shifting, and I see it shifting pretty quickly.
And yeah, that was really interesting what you were talking about as well in terms of where it is now. I mean, you've been doing it for a while already, and I guess you sort of are in that position where you know it so well. You can predict the future a little bit if you like. For those businesses that are just sticking their heads in the sand thinking, this will be fine, I'm pretty sure it'll all stay like it is now. That's what I got from you, that this is constantly changing. This is going to change, and it's going to become, even more of a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a saying, it's never a problem until there's a problem. So that's exactly what compliance is. There's never a problem until you have an incident, you have a breach, you have an employee complaint, you have a government agency or insurance company that comes to you and says, okay, if you want to get this result, you need to provide this evidence, whether that's a payout, whether that's a contract, whatever the case may be. And so once that happens, then you're going to have to comply. So again, usually when it comes to insurance, the best time to go and sell insurance is when the neighbor's house burnt down. That's when people start thinking about these things. And so as more enforcement happens, I think we can all agree that cyber criminals are not going away. All we're seeing is more hackers and attackers and things like that, whether it's a nation state, whether it's just for ransomware purposes and revenue generation purposes, they're expanding, and that expansion is going to result in companies having to comply in order to get payouts and whatever it is that they're trying to do.
And some of the stuff you were talking about, I will admit, went over my head. And then you mentioned GDPR, and I thought, oh my goodness, the bane of my life, GDPR. I'm already doing it, and I didn't even think about it. So I was quite it's quite optimistic what you were saying, that it's, once you know one thing like that, like say one area of compliance, you can be taught, whether by you guys at Kaseya or, you can learn other areas of compliance and sort of branch out fairly easily. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. So, we talked about acronyms. Compliance tends to have a lot of acronyms. IT has a lot of acronyms. So somebody, actually, I was talking to an IT professional, and they said, wow, compliance has a lot of acronyms. I said, IT literally stands for information technology. So I said, once you kind of, it does sound like a foreign language initially, but as you get into it and as you start understanding the basics, at the end of the day, it's all about protecting data. So, consumer data, private data. So you're just protecting data. And there's only so many ways that you can protect data. So if you have a compliance standard, whether it's CCPA or GDPR or HIPAA, regardless of the acronym, you got to have a business continuity plan. So you got to back up your data. You have to store it, in certain places. You've got to encrypt it. You've got to password protect it. And that's pretty much across the board of all the different standards that are out there.
Yeah, which brings us right back to checking and, just going through records and reviewing, regular reviews, which I feel like is the mantra of this episode. Max, give us a little bit idea. If people haven't heard the podcast yet, hopefully they're going to leap over and do that. And I'll give you the details on how to in a minute. But just give us a little plug about Kaseya and what you're up to if people are interested in hearing a bit more.
For those that don't know Kaseya, it is a large software company. We've got roughly 30 different products in our line cards and SKUs. So I'm personally responsible for 3 different business units. The one I primarily talked about was the Compliance Manager GRC. That is an acronym for Governance, Risk, and Compliance. And effectively what it is that it is a software platform that significantly simplifies the process of doing an ongoing compliance as a service. So MSPs will use our software to deploy out to their customers, and then we'll literally just take you step by step through the process of different compliance standards. And so whether it's the security rule, the privacy rule, the breach notification rule, GDPR, again, I can keep going and going with ISO 27001 and so on. You don't have to be a compliance expert to use our software. And from a education perspective, we like to say that we can make you an authority pretty quickly. I always am careful when I don't like to say compliance made easy. That has a negative connotation in the MSP space. As an MSP, you still have to know how to deliver your services. So you got to do your patching and your backup and answer questions and run scans. But every good MSP knows how to do that. What we do is we provide the framework and the process and the workflow to walk you through a true compliance as a service offering that you can deliver to your customers.
Brilliant stuff. So you can check out the Paul Green MSP Marketing Podcast, episode 131, if you want to hear a little bit more with Max. Just to, complete the circle here, none of the guests or presenters on this week's show are shoplifters. But thank you very much for watching. And we will be back again with another bite next week.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.